Yes, people, what's happening? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another video. First things first, guys, make sure you smash the like, subscribe if you're new around here, all that good stuff. And in today's video, going to be looking ahead to the London derby against West Ham on Saturday lunchtime. A little bit of a tactical breakdown, what the best team is going to be to take on the Hammers, maybe how we fit Christopher Nkunku into that side, the role of Jadon Sancho, the right balance on the midfield. And delighted to be joined by Connor for this one, bro. It's been a while. Welcome back. Always a pleasure to catch up. Before we dive into the West Ham game, obviously we're about 4 games in the league now, obviously 6 games in total if you include the Conference League ones. What have you made of the early start to life under Maresca? Are you seeing what you kind of expected to see, or are there a few things that have surprised you?
Yeah, we're seeing exactly what I expected to see, to be honest. I'm really happy with how it's been. I know that a few Chelsea fans have sort of murmured the whole of not being 100% pleased with obviously the results, and that's fair enough. With the draw against Palace, which I think we deserved to win, I think we coached a very good game. I think we're starting to see the tactical fluidity that he has as well. I think a lot of people were quite scared that he was very sort of Sarri-esque, was a lot of the words you were hearing. I tried to tell people at the start that it wasn't like that with Maresca. Like, I very much believed that he was going to be very fluid with his tactics, very sort of chessboard-esque. If something happens, he wants to make a proactive move. And I think we've seen that very early on, the halftime changes, the few different system changes against Palace, going into a whole different build-up structure, a few different out-of-possession structures as well. I think we've already seen just how sort of fluid he is, and he's not as strict as was made out to begin with. So I think we're seeing a really good signs from Maresca, the players as well. I think we've had some really good performers already, and we won ugly the other day, which is something that you can't always say we did, especially in recent years. If we don't play well, we had usually lost games. That wasn't the case the other day. Played poorly, and we got away with a win. So it's a positive from another perspective as well. So I'm really happy with the start under Maresca.
No, I agree. I think definitely that Bournemouth win was a win that last season, a couple seasons ago, we would have lost that game. People always go on about, and I said it myself, well, if we take our chances and whatnot, if we score more, we scored more goals, taking our opportunities, then it wouldn't be a problem how many goals we let in. But as you say, you can't always rely on the attack to bail you out. We've got to learn how to win games like 1-0, scrappy, backs to the wall, dig in. And that's exactly what we did against Bournemouth. And you can sometimes wonder what the plan is in terms of the squad building. But when you're able to bring on Nkunku, Felix, Sancho to try and change a game, the chances are one of those guys is probably going to be able to do something. And that's exactly what we saw. So whilst it can be difficult to fit all these pieces together, and it's not an easy task for Maresca, I tell you what, it definitely isn't a bad position to be in. But I mean, we look ahead to West Ham. Obviously, we missed Malo Gusto against Bournemouth, along with Dewsbury Hall, Fernandez, and whatnot, and obviously Romeo Lavia. Without Lavia, the midfielders, I think we've been passed through in the middle of the park quite easily on a number of occasions against Palace, against Bournemouth, in the games that Lavia's missed. Obviously, West Ham have invested heavily. It's a tough place to go. They've not had the best start to the season. Our record's not great there. Definitely haven't won in our last 3 visits. Are you expecting Maresca to go with the same tactical setup? Is there any reason for us to sort of be changing tactics and trying anything different?
I think it's going to be quite similar. I think we're going to see sort of that 3-2 base that we've been seeing with an inverted fullback. It's how we go about sort of making those changes, because, like you've said, the midfield has been bypassed a few times, and I think that is due to not having somebody who's a bit more of a sitter in there. Like, you have people like Casado or Enzo in there who are a little bit more roaming, sort of free. And then when that ball does break, there is a lot more space for them to exploit. Whereas Lavia is a bit more stagnant in the middle of the park, and he sort of just holds that position quite well. So I do think we'll see that exact tactical sort of discipline, but it's just how we form that, especially if Gusto, because he has been back in training this week, but I don't see him being available for West Ham if I was to be sort of cautious about it. So it just sort of depends. Do we see Casado inverting from right back? That's something that I would personally like to see, to sort of add a bit more protection.
We cannot see Disasi again at right back.
Exactly.
We cannot. I mean, Maresca watched that against Bournemouth. He knows it was terrible. Everyone knows it was awful. We've seen it several times now. We don't need to see it again. I mean, do you think there's? I mean, I agree with you on Gusto. Back in training, I don't know whether they take a risk and chuck him straight back in. I suspect that he could well be on the bench, which means probably either Caicedo inverting, or I think it's fair to say that he probably isn't going to give Akampong a chance. I think it's too big a game. Or, is there a train of thought that maybe you could switch Cucurella to the right-hand side and play Renato Vega at left back, maybe?
Yeah, I think that's definitely like something you could see because Cucurella did it last season. He deputised at right back a few times. It's definitely something he's got in his arsenal. The only thing would be is he would be playing as the right-sided centre back in that case, probably not
True.
inverting. So it just depends how that works. But I think either way, the way I've sort of configured the team that I would go for is whether it's Casado inverting from right back or, like you say, pushing Cucurella over and having Vega at left back. I would be starting Vega in this game.
Yeah, but I would agree on that front. I think, Lavia, given his fitness issues and given how fragile he's been since his time at the club, I would be shocked if Maresca chucked him straight back into the starting lineup. I would expect a similar midfield to what we saw against Bournemouth, probably Vega in there with maybe Enzo and Caicedo, something like that. I think the defence pretty much picks itself. The centre-back pairing we know is going to be Colwell and Fofana. And then it's really just what happens at right back is the only thing that's up for grabs there. But in terms of the forward line, obviously we're blessed with options. I think probably Cole Palmer and Madueke will both start, even though they had quietish evenings against Bournemouth. They're still Chelsea's two in-form attacking players, as it were. And I think right now, as things stand, they're certainly nailed on in that starting 11 right now. Interesting one is Christopher Nkunku. Obviously, we know his quality. We know how good he is. We obviously know that he missed a lot of football last season. Started pre-season really well. A couple of really important penalties, as it turns out, in those Conference League games. But he's been used sparingly by Maresca in the league. Now, that could be by design. That could be, maybe managing his minutes. Or that could just be not really sure where he fits in. Got an important goal. And whatever you think of him, whatever you think of where he fits in or how he fits in, he is the best finisher at the football club. And somehow he needs to be on the pitch. For all Jackson's qualities, and there are a lot, let's be honest, Jackson doesn't score that goal that Nkunku does against Bournemouth. It just doesn't happen. He hasn't got that composure, I don't think. He's got a lot of different skills that he brings to the table that Nkunku doesn't. But where do you see him fitting in? Because really, he is a number 10. And with Palmer playing there, he's not going to get ahead of him. And then out wide, it doesn't really suit him. So I think Nkunku's almost too good not to be in this team. But how do you fit him in? Because right now, the only way I see him fitting in is if you don't play Jackson.
Yeah, and I had this exact conversation actually this morning. I completely agree. I think you've got the Palmer role, which would probably arguably be Nkunku's best role, sort of playing as that right-sided number 8, where he can join to the attack and he can sort of link from that sort of central role. We saw it in pre-season quite well. I think that would be his best role, but as you rightly said, Palmer's not going to be dropped from there, and Palmer has been brilliant in that role. So for me, Palmer's he's a set and forget. He's in that role. So then you've got the other options. You've put Nkunku up wide, but again, that's a similar reason to why I didn't want Palmer out wide. Nkunku can do it, but it's just not optimal, especially now that you've brought in such good options in wide areas. You've got Sancho who can do a bit of everything. You've got Neto, you've got Madueke, obviously Mudryk. You've already got those options to quite a high degree. You don't really need to force him out wide. You've got those. So then, like you said, it leaves you in the situation of you have to pick one of him or Jackson, and they both offer different assets. So I think that's probably what's been coming into Maresca's mind, starting the games with Jackson and sort of having the idea that Nkunku can affect the game with smaller amounts of minutes, less chances because of that high finishing sort of caliber, and he can have his impact from there, as he did at the weekend. And Jackson can offer more of an all-round sort of tiring the legs of the defenders and sort of just being a bit more of a nuisance for a longer amount of minutes. So I think that's where we're at with Nkunku right now. He was brilliant in that little cameo the other day. He got a huge goal, and he's clearly not going to be happy with this role sitting on the bench. So it is a tough one. If I had to predict it, though, I don't think he'll start against West Ham, which I think is a bold move because I don't think he's going to be happy with that. And I do agree that he's too good to not be playing, especially when he's showing that caliber of finish and that ability to change a game. But I just think for the overall balance of the team, we're more likely to see him start on the bench again.
I would agree with that. And it is a strange one, sort of thinking that your best finisher at the club is more often than not at this point in time going to be left on the bench. I mean, you make a lot of good points. Right now, for me, I'm sure you may agree or not, but realistically, if Nkunku's going to play regularly in this team, it's going to be as a number 9 right now. Because unless Palmer goes through a huge dip in form or unless Madueke does and they decide to put Palmer out on the right-hand side, although we saw that against Bournemouth in the second half, and he was very much isolated from the game. It didn't particularly suit him. I'm not saying he can't play there, but certainly in a Maresca-based style of football, where Palmer's not a touchline winger. Maybe you can get away with one not touchline winger in those wide areas, but if you've got two each side, if you're having Nkunku and Palmer down the flanks, it don't really work because they're not isolating their man. Their intention's always going to be to drift into the centre, and then you're taking up that space that a Felix would occupy or an Nkunku would look to occupy, and it all becomes like really congested in there, which is exactly what you don't want. But yeah, it's a strange one, isn't it, really? I mean, at some point, I'm not saying that Nkunku's going to be anything ridiculous, like he's going to be considering his options or anything, but he didn't join the club to not be a regular starter. And I think he would have been under the impression that when he came, I'm going to be not maybe main man, but I'm going to be like a big part of what's going on. I'm not saying he can't get to that point right now, but I mean, do you almost feel this is perhaps one of the big disadvantages of having so many options available is you can't really work out the best way to fit them all in?
It's such a tough sort of question because it also depends on how you sort of view a squad, and I think so many fans or so many analysts, so many people in clubs, I think they have different ways of viewing it. Because obviously, if you're looking at it, the big thing that people do is what is your best 11. But nowadays, a best 11 is quite null and void because it's more of a squad of 15, 16 players and sort of role players and what they're going to do. So it all depends on if, of course, like I say, Nkunku's not going to be happy always coming off the bench. But how can you manage those minutes? Can he, especially when games come thick and fast next week, for example, with 3 in a week, in the space of 7 days, whatever, is he going to get maybe one start instead of Palmer in midweek in the number 10? And then in the Premier League games, maybe he comes off the bench with half an hour to go and he still has that impact up front. So you see him in a variety of different roles, but you're still seeing him get clock nearly 150 minutes, 120 minutes, whatever it is, in the space of 3 games. It's just in a different way of accumulating them. I do agree, though, with what you said. And obviously, Nkunku, when he first joined the club, before a lot of the high-profile, high-brow sort of youngsters had been included and brought in, he would have been looking at Chelsea thinking, all right, I'm being signed to be at least one of the main men, like you said. And like my number 10 role is pretty much going to be cemented. I'll play in my favoured position and it'll be sort of like that. So it is tough. And I do feel like further down the line, it could cause issues if he's not happy being that sort of, again, role player type. But if he plays himself into the team and he keeps scoring goals to a high degree, like he scores 3, 4 in a row of what he just did the other day, then he just will have to start over Jackson, and that will just be like that will just have to happen. So he's got the opportunity to play himself into the squad. I think he's doing everything right at the minute. It's not. I'm not saying that he's not playing himself in. I'm not saying it's his fault because I think he's doing everything perfectly correct at the minute. But it is a tough job for Maresca to sort of, like you say, weave his way with this squad and sort of find out how to use it in certain times.
I mean, another player, that people are excited about, obviously very impressive debut, that's Jadon Sancho. Perhaps maybe an unnecessary signing in terms of, options already available, but looks a good opportunity, certainly from a financial point of view. Started really well with a brilliant debut against Bournemouth, obviously direct, making things happen. There's still a long way to go. Obviously, we need to see more of that. We need to see, him get back to that Dortmund form, not the Man United Sancho. But this throws an interesting dynamic into the mix as well. He could well be in line to start his first game. I'm not saying he will, but he could be. What kind of role do you envisage him having going forwards this season? Do you think it's very much we're going to see him predominantly operating down the left, or do you think maybe there's scope for him to play down that right-hand side as well?
I think we're more predominantly going to see him on that left side. I think he's going to make that his own. I do genuinely think, like, I agree with the notion that he wasn't exactly a must buy, but again, for the value, I think it was a good buy, and I think he got so much ability and he actually fits this system really well. So I do think that we could see a big resurgence from him, and I do think he suits that left side brilliantly for Maresca. I think he's going to make that his own, and I think you're more likely to see Neto sort of playing either side based on who plays on which other. So at the minute, say Madueke on the right, Sancho on the left, but you can have Neto deputising either one, or if Neto's in form, he plays on the left, Madueke right, Neto on the right, Sancho on the left, for example. So you've got options there. Sancho could play on the right, but like I say, I think you're more likely to see Neto doing shifts on either side than Sancho on either side. I think he'll more stamp that left side down. But yeah, he was absolutely brilliant the other day. I think he just brings a sort of different type of winger. You've got your likes of Madueke, Neto, and even Mudryk, who are looking to be a little bit more direct, use their pace down, and be very like 1v1 heavy. Sancho's really good at drawing the double team and then almost just dumping the ball off to another player to allow them to have that advantage in space. Saw it with his pass to Nkunku. His incisive passing into the box to give you those extra opportunities and touches in and around the box. That little like link up play and just those clever little flicks. He's just got that extra added quality that you need in and around the box, especially to break down low blocks, very stubborn defences. So I think he's going to be a really good addition. And I think he really showed that in that 45 against Bournemouth, where he's brilliant.
No, I absolutely agree. And just kind of round out, mate. Where do you see this game being won and lost? What do you think Chelsea are going to have to do to kind of combat the threats that West Ham offer? Obviously, we don't know if full crew's going to play. We're not really sure what personnel are going to be there, but they're only going to be strong in the midfield with the likes of Edson Alvarez and whatnot. Mohamed Kudus, Bowen, dangerous threats here. What do you think Chelsea are going to have to do in order to beat West Ham, and where do you see it being won and lost?
I think we've got to be really careful on the ball to not lose it in those wide central defensive areas. So if, say, Kukurea left centre-back, Fofana right centre-back, you've got, if that ball breaks, that's where Kudus and Bowen can really hurt you, especially when one of the, say it's Caicedo inverting from right back or Vega inverting from left back. Once that is happening, that is where you can really get hurt, because if you get caught in that rotation, there's space for the likes of Kudus to attack. So I think you've got to be really careful and sort of pragmatic on the ball in those deeper phases of play. Again, I think Madueke is going to have a huge task on his hands. I think he's going to have to be really defensively inclined, which he has been this season and was at the back end of last season under Poch. So I think he's going to have a big sort of role to play, covering and getting back to help with Kudus on that left-hand side, where he's played a bit more often this season with Bowen playing on the right. Like you said, the strike situation, it's a bit privy at the minute. You don't really know which way it's going to go. Antonio has started most of his games there. Fulcro could be back and he might get a start, but it's tough to tell. It could just be Antonio again. So you got to be careful again with him making those runs in behind and sort of just stretching the pitch, working hard. And then again, going forward for us, I think it is just going to be one of those games where you have to sort of try and isolate your wingers. It's going to be very down to the T. I think it's going to be quite similar to what we've seen. Can you find those spaces in the half spaces? Get close to their centre backs. Jackson's going to have to drop in and receive the ball to sort of allow you to turn and attack. Both their defensive mids play quite deep in their out of possession. So again, if you've got Enzo and Palmer in those roles, how can they find a little bit of space to collect the ball and play through them to then allow you to attack that back four? So I think it's going to be a tough game. I am not worried about it, but they're probably one of the most transition heavy sides in the league. Got very deadly weapons in transition. And if Chelsea aren't on it and they do make mistakes, I think there's a good chance you could get punished. So it's going to have to be a clean game. Like Chelsea need to make sure they are very savvy to just being safe on the ball, slowing that tempo down and making sure it's played at our pace rather than allowing West Ham to sort of win their duels and sort of make it a bit of a scrap.
Yeah, no, I agree. We are going to very much have to be, on top of our game. We're going to have to make sure that we are performing to our best, because even though West Ham haven't started that great, the players are there that can cause problems, even if you're just a little bit off it, with the likes of Paqueta, and Kudus and Bowen and whoever else plays, whether it's Somerville or whatever it is. They've got players that if you give the ball away in the middle of the park, they've got the quality that in 2-3 passes, they could be in on goal. And that's something that we have seen with opposition teams this season. Bournemouth, for example, last weekend, even Palace to a degree, were able to string 2-3 passes together and they were sort of in with a goal scoring opportunity. And against the better teams, you are going to get punished with a better quality of player. We cannot afford to turn up to this game and play how we did against Bournemouth, because West Ham have got better quality than Bournemouth in those attacking areas, and we will be punished for it. So whilst it's great to scrape a win and whatnot, we also have to accept that there are a lot of things that weren't great. And if we play like that against better teams, we are going to get picked off. That's just the reality of the situation. So we've got to keep it tight at the back. We've got to, be patient on the ball. Don't give it away in stupid areas. And then, as always with us, can we be clinical with the chances we create? Because we will create some opportunities. It's just going to come down to do we take them? And this is a tough game. I think it's one of the toughest games of the season. In all fairness, it's one of the hardest places to go. I know that might sound a bit odd to some people, but it really is difficult. So let's hope we can get another 3 points. We're going to 4 home games after this on the spin in terms of in all competitions, League Cup, Europa League, couple of home games against Brighton and Forest coming up before the next international break. So if we can get 3 points here, this is an opportunity to go into that international break, potentially 4 wins on the spin in the league. You know, the greatest of respects to your Brightons and your Forests. There's a chance to sort of really start to build a little bit of momentum and kind of see where the season could potentially be heading as we go into that October break. But mate, thanks so much for joining me. Greatly appreciated as always. Some fascinating insight there. If people want to check out what you do, they should know where you are by now, but let them know anyway.
Yeah, so just Connor Holden Football on YouTube, mostly tactical breakdowns, little player analysis bits, and then just I think it's Connor Holden 00 on Twitter. Yeah, go check me out on there as well for little tactical threads and just posting about all things, not just Chelsea, but obviously a lot of it being Chelsea, seeing as that's what I enjoy talking about, as you do too, both Chelsea fans. So.
Nah, perfect. Yeah, guys, Connor's channel will be tagged in the title. Make sure you click it, go and show him some love, subscribe. Loads of great stuff over there. And I'll drop his Twitter in the description as well. Go and drop him a follow for all your football tactical analysis. Guys, smash the like, subscribe. You know what to do. Catch you again another one soon. Up the